Okay, let's call the meeting to order. It's a little after 6:30. We please start.
San Mateo County. San Mateo County. Atherton,
Rick DeGolia,
Belmont, Julia Mace, Brisbane, Colleen Mackin, Burlingame,
John Colson.
Colma,
Ken Gonzalez.
Daly City, hang on one second. Oh no. They're trying again. East Palo Alto,
Carlos Romero.
Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Harvey Rohrbeck,
Hillsborough,
Leslie Ragsdale.
Los Banos,
Paul Yanis.
Betsy Net.
Millbrae,
Andrew's phone from remote.
thank you. Pacifica,
Tiger Jazz Crows Big Step.
Portola Valley,
Jeff Alves.
Redwood City,
Homer Martinez.
San Bruno,
Marty Medina.
San Carlos, San Mateo,
Adam Lorraine,
South San Francisco, Woodside,
Kevin Bryant.
thank you. And we have four.
Okay, welcome everyone to the May Peninsula Clean Energy Board meeting. The first item on the agenda is public comment, preferably for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone with public comment? I don't see anyone in the room. And from this perspective, I don't see anyone online. Okay, can we get an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda?
Someone.
Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Anybody online wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Okay, we could do a roll call.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City, Los Banos,
Yes.
Menlo Park, Millbrae,
Aye.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, and Woodside.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the chair report. Thursday and Friday, a number of us, myself, Anders, Carlos, and Donna, and Marty.
Not me.
We're at.
They wanted me there very bad.
At the Cal CCA conference in San Diego, which we haven't had a conference for 4 years. It was good to see everybody. So I'd say that the biggest issue for all of us probably was the networking. We did have a lunch on Friday for board members, which I would say was pretty uneventful. I mean, I made a speech and a statement about it being important for board members from disparate CCAs to connect and to create a mechanism for us to connect, because Cal CCA really doesn't enable that. And that it's important for us to do it because we are those that drove the setting up of the CCAs in every jurisdiction that the 26 CCAs exist. There has been a turnover for some of the older CCAs like PCE, where our board is a majority of members who weren't there at the beginning, but it's still a very strategic board. And as board members, we deal with strategic issues, and it's really important to cross-fertilize between CCAs to see what other CCAs are doing. So it was a pretty strong statement that I made there. Cal CCA's desire is for board members to really facilitate legislative and regulatory contacts for them, which is extremely valuable. And we addressed that, but there are other strategic issues that we all need to deal with, CCA to CCA, that I think are extremely important. And we'll see, there were people that responded very positively to that who were on other CCA boards. So we'll see if something emerges from that. I would say from the presentations that I attended, the most interesting one kind of is along the lines that I just talked about in terms of strategic issues for CCAs. You may recall, I think it was 2 years ago, staff brought before us the creation of a California Community Choice Finance. We looked at that, but nobody really was focused on it from PCE, and we were economically in pretty good shape and just didn't dive into it. Well, I was pretty impressed by the quality of the presentation and the information that was delivered. There are 5 CCAs that joined it and 1 CCA that subsequently joined after it was created. We were asked to join in the beginning. And those, what they've done is they created a market with muni bonds supported by power contracts, power purchase agreements that various of those CCAs had negotiated and were their assets, and that they contributed into this mechanism. $5 billion worth of power altogether, and it saved those CCAs more than $1 million each a year in power costs. So I was really impressed with it. And I followed up with Garth Salisbury, who is the CFO at MCE and who really led that charge. He had an investment banking background, and he is going to present to our audit and finance committee at the June 12th meeting. So we'll look at it. I don't know if it's something we'll want to do, but I mean, interest rates have changed since they started that, but I know they're continuing to offer some of those bonds and to develop it, and we just have to weigh the strengths and weaknesses of it, and that'll be presented, and ultimately it'll come if we decide audit and finance likes it, goes to the executive committee, will come here and we'll talk about it. Other than that, I thought that I mean, PCE showed extremely well at this conference. I don't think we probably had the most people of any CCA because we're not in Southern California, but we really showed. We had 27 people there. It was great for our staff, and it was from the few of us board members that were there. I think we all felt really good about how the staff was and the reception. We won 2 awards there, which I'm sure Jan will talk about in her report, so I won't under. But I was most impressed at how Cal CCA had matured over the last 4 years. I think their analysis of the situation in California is far more sophisticated today than it was 4 years ago. And I want to find a mechanism to share that with all of you because it was pretty interesting. That's all I have to report. That's just the CEO.
Real quick, I would just like to remind everyone, if you could please state your name before you give a comment. So those watching at home or video recording afterwards makes it a little bit easier. Thank you.
Can you go to the next slide? So tonight I'll be talking about staffing updates, legislative updates, the conference that Rick discussed just now, and upcoming meetings. And I also want to let those of you who have let us know that you have problems hearing well when you're remote and not at a meeting. We've gotten feedback from a couple of you that we are aware of that and we are working on it and trying to find the right technology solution to make it better. Okay, next slide, please. So staffing update. So we currently have 2 positions posted on the website. One is for power resources analyst specialist, although we are in the final stages of interviewing finalists for that position. We're actually hiring 3 people into the power resources team at that level. One person that we've already moved in there is Shayna, right here. We've hired another person, or we have an offer out for someone, and a 3rd person. So we're about ready to close that down. We also have a new position, account services specialist, basically to backfill the position Shayna had in our account services group. And we're hiring 7 summer interns. We have told you about that before. We received over 100 applications, and the teams collectively interviewed over 20 applicants. And so far, we've made an offer and have accepted offers for 3. We have another offer awaiting acceptance for one of the positions, and the final interviews are wrapping up for the last 3. So we're very excited to be having such a robust summer intern program this year. And so that's great. Hopefully we can continue that in the future. And then we will also be soon posting a position for senior manager of local power development. I know I've been talking about that for a while, but it's just getting a lot of stuff going on. Haven't gotten that final job description up yet. Next slide, please. On the legislative side, there's a lot of activity going on in Sacramento. And I want to thank Mark Hirschman for putting some comments together for me to share with you today. So the first bill is SB 537, sponsored by our local senator, Josh Becker. And we are one of the sponsors of this bill to amend the Brown Act. A floor vote is scheduled for tomorrow in the state Senate on SB 537. Which would allow some members of multi-jurisdictional bodies like ours to attend meetings virtually from undisclosed remote locations. And I want to thank Donna, Vice Chair Donna Colson, and Director Marty Medina, both of whom traveled to Sacramento in the last month to provide strong lead testimony in support of this bill when it was first considered in the Governance and Finance Committee and then in the Judiciary Committee. It's super helpful to have you there in person to provide that testimony. So thank you very much. The next bill is AB 1373, authored by Assemblymember Garcia. So earlier this year, the governor introduced a budget trailer bill that seeks to broaden the scope of procurement by enabling the Department of Water Resources to act as a central procurement entity. And the trailer bill also adds a capacity payment penalty for resource adequacy deficiencies. Further, it seeks to clarify the Public Utilities Commission integrated resource plan authority over CCA. So we and CalCCA have met with legislators and administration officials to share our deep concerns with this bill. So the bill is moving ahead in the Senate. A vote was taken in the Senate's Budget Subcommittee this morning, and we're looking forward to evaluating the updated bill once it is available in print. In the Assembly, we were able to successfully advocate for the introduction of a policy bill on the very same issues as the budget bill. So we're continuing to work with local legislators and other stakeholders to refine both the budget bill and this bill to address our continuing issues of concern, and are hopeful that we'll get this to where it will be not so horrible as it is when it started. The third bill is AB 538, introduced by Assemblymember Holden. And this is legislation to regionalize the grid. It's an effort to move California away from having the California Independent System Operator as the manager of our state's electric grid, and in place have a multi-state regional transmission system. as we anticipated, the bill's author has withdrawn it from consideration for the time being. However, the same day it was held up, Governor Newsom issued a press release indicating his interest in advancing regionalization. So we expect that this might be revisited by the legislature soon, and that it won't be a 2-year bill, that it actually might progress this year, and hopefully we'll be able to have some input on how that finally turns out. So next slide, please. Actually, any questions about any of the legislative? So the annual conference, we received 2 awards. First, we received first place award in the equity category with our outreach grants program. And this is largely due to Kirsten and Schwinn's work in this area, supported by Vanessa and Carlos. So it was really great to be recognized for this. And of course, thank you to the board for supporting our efforts for the outreach grants. This is where we provide grants to a number of local nonprofits to help us get the word out to residents that are harder to reach, and get the word out in different languages. And so it was really great to be recognized for this. We got a little trophy. There was an error in the engraving, so we'll have it next month to show it to you. We were runner-up in the decarbonization category with, along with East Bay Community Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy for the work on REACH codes. And this is a photo of all of us who were there at the Cal CCA conference. There were 27 staff members plus 4 board members. So I didn't get the count on other CCAs, but we were definitely the best represented Northern California CCA. And I don't know how it compared to the ones down in SoCal, but it was really great to be there. It's a beautiful venue. It's great to have time just to relax with each other and work hard. And there we are. And so I do want to thank Rick and Anders and Marty and Carlos for making the trip down there and representing us as members of our board, and for attending the elected officials lunch. And in response to your comments, Rick, about the community choice financing agency, we have looked at that. It becomes more interesting as there's a greater spread between taxable and non-taxable interest rates. So up until the last year, there wasn't a lot of reason for us to look at that too closely, but certainly that's something that's on our list of things to do. And it'd be great to have Garth here to make a presentation at the Audit and Finance Committee. So thank you for arranging that for us. Any other questions about the conference? Next slide, please. And we've also been busy here as staff doing good work for the community. So at our April all-staff meeting here, we worked as a team to put together almost 400 hygiene kits for the Samaritan House in San Mateo. Thank you to Nellie and Brianna for organizing all of us to get that together. It was a great team building event for us to figure out how to put everything together. And we tried a lot of different methods, and eventually we got the right things in the right quantities and the right data. So it was a lot of fun. And then we also had a second event where some of our PCE staff down their bottom left corner picture worked with Second. Thank you, Deanna. Worked with Second Harvest Food Bank to help sort over 25,000 pounds of produce. So thank you to our staff for doing that. It feels good to be doing projects to give back to our community. And then last but not least, upcoming meetings in June. Citizens Advisory Committee, June 8th, Audit and Finance Committee at 8:30 here on the 12th, followed by the Executive Committee at 10 o'clock here. And then the next board meeting, June 22nd here, which will be my last board meeting as the CEO. And look forward to seeing all of you at that time. Any questions? comments? Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Citizens Advisory Committee report. And I see Cheryl online.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Well, good evening, Honorable Chair DeGolia and members of the board. Our committee met Thursday, May 11th. Kirsten Andrews Schwinn, Senior Manager of Community Relations, reviewed the proposed work group plan for the coming year. We passed a motion to accept the plan with 2 changes. Rename the Residential Solar and Storage Programs Working Group to Local Solar and Storage Programs Group, and also to change our name from the Citizens Advisory Group to Community Advisory Group, since, as Kirsten pointed out, citizenship isn't required for a membership. Both the CAC and the public had enthusiastic questions for Phil Kobernick, Transportation Programs Manager, when he talked about his upcoming pilot of the Managed Electric Vehicle Charging Program, including how EV load shifting can help achieve PCE goals. Jason Mendelson, Vice Chair, offered to help develop surveys for pilot participants. Building Programs Manager Blake Hershaft introduced a proposed program to support local government efforts to electrify their city buildings. CAC member and public comments endorsed the program. Member Diane Bailey recommended offering early funding through pilot grants to cities with urgent needs. After hearing public comments describing these urgent needs from different cities, we passed this recommendation. To support the local government electrification program, including the incentive structure as written by staff, and to explore expanding the scope of funding if feasible. The CAC requests that PCE accept early applications from cities for urgent projects, such as projects for which electrification would not be a viable option if the funding were to be delayed a year. The CAC recommends that an equity lens be used when selecting and prioritizing projects. Kirsten reported that 22 people, a record number, have applied for 4 CAC openings. She invited ideas for how to keep those 18 people who won't be able to join us interested and involved, possibly serving as ambassadors for our work in the community. Member suggestions included training and including ambassadors in outreach, hosting quarterly trainings for them and sharing training materials, encouraging ambassadors to attend meetings as members of the public, leveraging the experience of those who've electrified their homes or participated in one of PCE's energy programs, and inviting interested or experienced ambassadors to participate in working group meetings. Finally, Katie Green reminded us that her term expires May 30th, and she did not ask for an extension. So we thanked Katie for all of her contributions to the CAC. That completes my report. Are there any questions?
Question, Carlos?
I do, so can they unilaterally change the name, or are they suggesting that we should?
No, that's a proposal.
Okay, all right, no, and I'm not suggesting it's a bad proposal, I just wanted to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that makes sense.
When will the new CAC members be, this is Jeff Alves, when will the new CAC members be announced or approved perhaps?
They're going to be onboarded in July, so I'm assuming right before that, possibly next month.
Okay, it's June. Meeting.
Next meeting.
Next meeting, is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
So Betsy Nash, I would just like to say thank you for bringing forward the local government electrification program, and am very excited about that possibility, and would love to see it move through the board as quickly as possible with early funding possibilities. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. I don't see any questions online. So we will move on. The next item on the agenda is approval of the DEAI action plan.
Good evening, Board of Directors. I'll be presenting this item with Sheena Barnes and Kristen Andrews Schwind. And we're pleased to bring to you tonight our Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion Action Plan. Slide. So to outline our presentation tonight, Donna will actually be reviewing the policy commitment that you passed in October. She will be describing the development of the DEI action plan to implement that policy. We'll be going over the plan outline and structure, the key actions, an overview of the very thorough appendices, and the recommended action for tonight. Slide. I'd like to pass this to Donna, who chaired the DEI board.
Yeah, thank you. It's okay, I'm gonna work from here. So I, first of all, just give a little background, because we have a lot of new people here who may not know the history of this. So when the George Floyd situation occurred and our CAC, in their very thoughtful way that they normally approach everything, came to us and said, you know, we really feel like we need to make a statement, we need to be a part of the solution, we need to think about this. And they had written kind of a one paragraph, sort of very impassioned and poignant start for this whole process. And the board was so appreciative. We talked about it, it was at a board meeting. We decided that the issue was compelling enough and important enough that it needed to have a subcommittee to focus on it. We probably needed to hire a consultant, and we really needed to think about putting together a comprehensive policy that focused on everything we were working on, from procurement to our programs and how we implement our programs, you know, our outreach, everything that we're doing, even our hiring processes, to make sure that we're always being fair, being open-minded, having an equity, access, and inclusion lens through everything we're doing. So we created a subcommittee, Rod, Sam, Carlos, you were on that with me, and Michael Smith, who many of you may know was with Redwood City, had Elmer's seat prior to him. Was an alternate, but Michael helped, and I believe that was all of us, right? Yeah. So there were 5 of us that worked together on this. And we ended up working with staff very closely. We hired a consultant, and that consultant helped us over the last 2 years to put together both a policy and then an implementation plan. Because just having a policy isn't really any good if you put it in a binder and you put it on the shelf. We wanted to not only have a policy, but then how that would translate into actual work that we would be doing. And then a way for us to benchmark that over time to make sure, in fact, that we were meeting all the goals and objectives. So this commitment that we as a board passed really is focused on creating a sustainable world with clean energy for everyone. We understand the longstanding systemic barriers that impede and advance the advancement of fair and inclusive policies and limit full participation of historically underserved and disadvantaged communities. I really like that language. We were a little more focused the first time around, and I think this is a more inclusive language, because we know there's lots of issues, from age to LGBTQ to race to gender, socioeconomic. It's not one particular element, and that the cross-sectionality of all that is really important. And finally, we have an obligation to maximize our efforts to eliminate disparities. So what you're going to receive tonight is the 2-year work of the committee, along the way, the CAC chipping in, this board chipping in, the executive committee reviewing it, and the staff. And I really just want to thank Shana. She took on this, Shana and Kirsten, but Shana, really, you just took on this responsibility wholeheartedly, and it's not an easy thing to do. This is really, really hard work to do. It's like very self-reflective. It's very, you have to be really thoughtful about it. And you have to ask really hard questions. You have to be willing to sort of stand up to your board and say, really, is this really right? This is how we want to do it. How can we be better? And I know there were some very tense meetings, you know, possibly on the verge of tears sometimes, with people working on this.
But I think we got it. And I think we're the first CCA in the state to maybe put together such a comprehensive statement. And I'm really proud of it. And I hope next year we win the award for this work. So thank you to my colleagues. Again, Sam, Rod, Carlos, you guys were incredible, and for the staff. So with that, I'll turn it back to you guys. So 2 slides more.
Oh, great. So as Donna mentioned, this action plan is our implementation of our DEA policy that the board adopted back in October. So it includes recommendations from the needs assessment and stakeholder engagement phase, which were surveys and interviews that our consultant conducted with key stakeholders, including all of our board at that time, our citizens advisory committee members, current staff, former staff, other outreach grantees, key community stakeholders that occurred in the spring of last year. And then we, our equity consultants, GCAP, further developed the action plan and then presented it to us late last fall, and it was further developed by staff, and we met, Kirsten and I met with all department heads to incorporate their feedback, kind of test for feasibility and staff bandwidth, and incorporated in staff feedback and into the action plan. We then met with the board DEI subcommittee, and I believe that was February of this year. Received positive feedback from the DEI subcommittee, and then met with the CAC in April of this year and presented the action plan to them. And they also, we also incorporated some feedback from them as well, which I believe is going to be in the board packet. We intend for this, so we're seeking board approval tonight on this action plan, but we want it to be a living document that we won't have to come back for every small change to the board as we move forward. As you will see, as we get into the details, there's a lot there. So we want to have a little bit of flexibility just moving forward and prioritizing, but also we'll report out to the board on at least an annual basis on status and whatnot. So we can move to the next slide. So the action plan outline, the full document was included in your packet. Starts off with an executive summary, foundation for strategic goals, which Kirsten will talk a little bit more about later. Some more introductory language on the purpose and elements of the action plan, kind of a summary of the action plan there. Gap analysis summary, that was also included as an appendix, which we'll get to later, but that summarizes the results of the surveys and interviews as well. Then the real meat of the action plan, 43 actions touching all departments at Peninsula Clean Energy. Then some getting started in evaluation, and then several appendices, which we'll describe in more detail later. And I'll hand this off to Kirsten.
Next slide. So the action plan proposes that diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion be the foundation of everything we do at Peninsula Clean Energy. Underpin the goals of each of the departments we see here. And next slide. So more specifically, we have goals for each area of focus, which roughly correspond to the system that are here. For the organization culture and DEI commitment, which is executive level. Our goals are to advance DEI within Peninsula Clean Energy's workforce, business practices, policies, and programs. The human resources, staffing, and recruitment to recruit a workforce, create a workforce that is more representative, provide equitable access to employment opportunities for underrepresented members of our communities. To provide training and development that requires employees to complete DEI training and encourage board members and CAC members to do so as well. Energy program development implementation, the goals are to define energy equity and set goals and metrics for achieving it through our programs, and to increase input and feedback from diverse and low-income communities. For marketing and account services, we have improved awareness, communication, and accessibility of PC customer service among low-income, disadvantaged, and limited English proficiency customers. And vendor and energy supplier diversity and social responsibility, ensure that vendors and suppliers do business with PC are environmentally conscious and have equitable business practices. Moving on. And there, as Shanna mentioned, there are 43 actions. I won't go through all of them here, but I'll give you a sense of how this document is structured. So for example, under organization culture and DEI commitment, you see there's a column for actions, for steps, for the timeline, who's taking the lead, the metrics, and some recommendations. So our consultant wrote all this, staff strengthened it, ran it by our departments to make sure it's feasible. And we have an internal DEI council that's working on the implementation with representatives from just about all the departments. And so, for example, one of the actions here is to establish a DEI action plan dashboard within the strategic plan and incorporate that into annual staff performance review process. And there's the steps, the timeline, the metrics, and the recommendation. Next slide. Another key task is to establish a DEI framework for decision making. And next slide. Additional commitments in this area, adapt a DEI policy, check, you did that in October, adapt the action plan, doing that tonight, forming a DEI council, we've done that, appointing a DEI lead, that's me for now, and doing an annual review of our legislative regulatory platform, section on environmental justice and affordability, and making sure it's meaningfully implemented, and to participate in or monitor the various regulatory proceedings involving this area. Next slide. There's quite a number of actions among for human resources, such as increasing the diversity of our staff team, recruitment. Moving on to the next slide. As well as updating some policies, ensuring salary transparency, enhancing DEI in our application and interview process, integrating DEI metrics in employee performance reviews, and launching a self-ID campaign so we can better support elements of diversity within our staff that may not be visual.
Explain what self-ID means.
Yeah, I'm not an HR specialist, but my understanding of it is that asking staff in a safe way to identify if they have, for example, any element of diversity that may not be visually apparent. So
Like hearing issues or, sorry, not just,
Yeah.
or maybe learning differences, or something like that. It might.
So exactly, include disabilities, things you may not know about until you ask them. Of course, it has to be done in a safe way and making it clear how the information will be used, how it will be kept confidential. But it's a way, I think, to help understand the needs of the staff better and better support elements of diversity we may not know about unless you ask.
Through the chair, before we start on this, the other thing I wanted to add to that, is some of the work we're doing in other organizations is that this should be also ongoing or open to change. Sometimes you don't have, you can, for example, I'm noticing my eyesight's poor or my hearing is bad, right? So I may not self-identify that early and then later on, they also want to identify those types of things, which is thinking about maybe ongoing.
Absolutely. Great. And speaking of poor, I'm so sorry. Okay, next slide. In terms of training and development, implement our DEI training plan, which is actually one of the appendices in your board packet today. Including training on how to respond to an accommodations request, training on community engagement, program planning, and ensuring professional development opportunities are available and accessible. Next slide. So mentioned for energy programs, we're working on coming up with an organizational definition of what does energy equity mean for us and how do we implement that. So we're doing some research, seeing what other agencies are doing. This is a robust conversation right now in the energy sector. And so that's a very exciting effort. Next slide. Also, deepen our community engagement and our program development, engaging with our community-based organizations and our local community leaders, reviewing current programs for gaps and inequities, and continuously refining programs to better align with customer needs, and developing and implementing a language and technology access policy for the entire customer journey for PCE programs. Next slide. Marketing and account services. I mentioned a language and technology access policy there, so we'll go to the next slide. We want to make sure that when we do customer awareness surveys, that we have, we're getting data that's inclusive and reflective of our entire customer base. Include our PCE, that ensuring that our PCE public website is accessible. Developing a page on that for our DEI content. Increasing accessibility in public meetings, in outreach materials, customer notifications. Ensuring that our customer service representatives provide quality customer service in all of our PCE priority languages. And ensure that customer email inquiries in our priority languages are responded in that language in the same time frame as inquiries in English. And I'll pass this on to Shana for the rest of the presentation.
Please, Colleen.
Colleen Mappin. Something that has come to mind in our city and through some of our council members' involvement in cafe program, if you're familiar with that in San Mateo County, is ageism. And one thing I would like to see included in this is an awareness of simplification of messaging to older residents, because our population is going to age exponentially in the next 20 years. And oftentimes things that are too technical just will be ignored or misunderstood. Thank you.
And
Yes, Donna.
thank you, Donna Colson. Thank you very much for that. I'm working on our, I'm sure most of you are working on your age-friendly cities documents. And part of the age-friendly city document that we put in at the city is to reach out and work with organizations like PCE and, you know, everything from MTC to PCE, One Shoreline, CCAG, everything, and try to figure out ways to engage our seniors back in the political process. So I think we can put a little bit back on ourselves too, that if you're looking at your age-friendly cities policy, go ahead and write in there and put partner organizations like PCE to help our seniors from the city level to be able to engage. For example, they're doing an online Zoom for seniors to explain how the bills work in Burlingame, and we're gonna probably set it up and do it Zoom, and then we'll invite all the other cities, you know, to be able to have their senior groups come and participate.
Move on to the next slide. All right, so for vendor and energy supplier diversity, this touches on some of our regulatory compliance obligations. Our first action is to finalize and adopt the recommended revisions of our PCE's contracting documents and templates. So making sure we have inclusive language in our contracts, perhaps a DEI commitment in our contracts so that people contracting with us know that we're committed to this. Also, one area that I will touch on later as well is perhaps adding requirements for diverse subcontractor spending, so kind of understanding our supply chain better and who our prime contractors are contracting with, which is something that the CPUC wants us to do and is actually important for tracking supplier diversity just in general. So kind of understanding our primes if they're diverse and also our subcontractors as well. So we can move on to the next slide for some additional action. There's a lot of actions here, so it'll be a busy summer. But finalize and adopt the recommendations in the legislation and regulatory analysis report. That's one of our appendices to this action plan. That was one of the first deliverables our consultant worked on and primarily analyzed how we can increase supplier diversity within Prop 209 considerations that we also have to comply with the public agency. And then I touched on contracting documents, adding qualitative criteria to our large scale RFOs for renewable energy procurements and kind of testing those and making sure those are continually updated for best practices. Adopt supply chain code of conduct. We did that at our last meeting, so that's good. Again, touching on develop and implement diverse subcontractor reporting, and then outreach materials on how to do business PCE and a GO 156 as a key document. So just having materials on our website about what a vendor might need to know before they enter into a contract with us, just to make it more accessible. Increasing visibility of our solicitation webpage, and then after we get all of our contract documents up to date, conducting a supplier diversity training for all staff so they understand the new contract templates and the reasoning behind why we're updating them. And then also encourage our vendors and suppliers to practice equity. So adding a question to our RFP template asking about any DEI programs they may have at their organization or company. And then also measure customer satisfaction with customer service provided by vendors. And we can move on. Great, so that was the meat of the action plan, the 43 actions that we touched on. This kind of rounds out the end of the document. So the first step is action plan execution. So getting it approved tonight, and then staff, we've already started implementing some pieces, but kind of going deeper into it and starting to work on it across the organization. We'll have to collaborate across teams in order to get a lot of this work done. So understanding that this is a company-wide priority and making sure that we have the resources to be able to collaborate on that. We want to be able to adjust the work. Like I alluded to earlier, we want this to be a living document. So if we realize something's not working and we're like, that recommendation we put in there really doesn't make any sense anymore. Like we should change it and come to a consensus with like council to like be able to adjust the action plan moving forward. And then an annual review of the action plan with the board and to kind of reassess priorities and as PCE grows, kind of incorporate those priorities into the action plan. So you go to the next slide. So overview of the appendices, the final bits of the document. As I touched on earlier, the gap analysis, which are areas of focus identified through the internal and external stakeholder surveys. They have a start for a DEI glossary, so some key terms that we have defined that we will eventually post to a DEI page on our website. The consultant provided a metrics dashboard example, so a way to perhaps portray our progress to the board. We may or may not end up using this example, but just a kind of a quick look, oh, how are they doing? Like what's kind of similar to our strategic plan report out that we do at a biannual basis. The training plan, which Kirsten talked about earlier, which has key topics for training and sample agendas for training. The legislation and regulatory analysis that I spoke about in the supplier diversity section. And then really getting into the weeds, an example of how to, the monthly diverse subcontractor pay report summary, how to track. I know everyone's favorite part, but how to track diverse subcontractor spending is an example form. Moving forward, next slide. So going a little bit deeper into training plan recommendations. We had a DEI basics training at our October all-staff retreat. And we will plan to offer a similar training to new staff as they become onboarded, perhaps using an off-the-shelf virtual training for new staff as they join, as they complete other trainings as part of their onboarding. Here's some other trainings that our consultant recommended, inclusive leadership, cultural competency, how to be an ally, inclusive one-to-one meetings, which is intended for people managers, inclusive hiring, also intended for people managers that can be used for across the organization, mitigating unconscious bias, and how to crawl, walk, and run diversity data, and also creating and leading mentoring circles. We have one more slide, and here's our recommended action for you all tonight. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Please let them know. Comment.
Please.
Oh, I'm Julia Mate, and my comment is, first of all, I just want to thank the committee, Donna and Kat, who originally brought this up a few years ago, and everyone on the subcommittee, and Jan, staff, everyone. This is just really, really important work. It's a huge lift. I'm really impressed by the plan and how important this was to staff and the board too. I mean, I think I really can't say enough about how impressive this is. The only two questions I had was just given how busy our staff is already, just looking at this, some of the tables, a lot looks like it's supposed to be, the timeline is second quarter of 2023. So just wondering if all staff was on board with this timeline, and it just seems like it's a lot to do with all of that you already have, but give it otherwise.
Sure, we actually had a timeline that was even more ambitious. So that said, the timelines are ambitious. We may not meet all of the deadlines. The idea is to, start off aggressively, and we'll do our best. As some of the timelines may slip, we're afraid if we give ourselves too much time, we may never start.
Great, okay, and then my second comment was, just when we're talking about training and when we're talking about diversity, I know that spectrum is really large, as we kind of mentioned. So just thinking, I know a lot of people think of it as cultural, ethnic, racial, things like that, but of course, diversity includes a lot of other things. So just making sure that all of our trainings and everything also kind of speak to all of the different kinds of diversity definitions there are out there. Thank you, yeah.
Well, I'll make a comment. I think it's really, you have risen to the level that we targeted when we first said, this is what we want to do. We knew it was comprehensive, and we knew it would be difficult because it goes to the core of a lot of things and a lot of how we are and how we view the world. And it's very hard to come up against those perceptions and those ways that you look at things, but it's very important. And I think that's what the board decided when we decided to pursue this. So I'm very impressed with the thoroughness and that we've gone through this journey so that we can now launch the real work. One comment I have is, I think that, I think it was Donna that said it, but whoever said, they hope that this can come before Cal CCA next year. I think that's a really important comment. To make that work, we have to know how to define this so it can be clearly explained. And it, in a way that people can embrace and not feel pushed by. And I don't think that will be easy, but I think this is really significant. And I think it would be extremely interesting to Cal CCA if we can lay it out in a way that they can see the value in it, because it's extremely rich. So thank you. And thank you to the subcommittee. I mean, this is a big deal.
That's nice. Well, I just want to thank Donna for chairing this whole committee and the rest of my colleagues, Carlos, Sam, Michael, and everybody that was involved, ECAP, Kristen, Shana. I think this was a very, very important thing. And when we talk about, a lot of times where we sit, we may say things that are very important, very symbolic, but how do you take something that is symbolic and put into action and also implementation? And I think through the work that everybody has done through this, is that we took something that is symbolic and meaningful, and we didn't just pat ourselves on the back and we're like, great job, we did our stuff for diversity. The hard part is the putting the nuts and the bolts and tightening it, and then revisiting it to always reflect and always refine this commitment to social justice and equity And it's more than just some sort of symbolic gesture. So, and it's important work that we do. And I hope that other Cal CCAs will attempt to implement something. Because when we talk about clean energy, some of the most vulnerable communities are the ones that are in the brunt of all this. You're not having accessibility for clean energy, not being able to afford electric cars or electric bicycles. And I think we're making it intentional and we're making it focused and centered that we are doing this. And I'm very, very proud that we were all a part of this and, you know, being like the pioneers of all this. So thank you for everybody for all their work. And I'm really, really proud of everybody's buy-in and investment in what we're doing.
Yes, I guess.
This work was really extraordinary. I hear diversity, equity a lot. To actually see this version, it's extraordinary. I was having a conversation with Jonathan Cordero yesterday. By the way, for those of you who know him, his health is not ideal for the moment. So if you have a relationship, by all means, reach out. So Jonathan Cordero is the word is Métis, but approximately the leader and chair of the Association of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. Wonderful human being. And, you know, I was saying to him, well, the context was I was talking to him about our local coastal land use update and how I'd love to run that by him before, you know, we get to coastal commission. And I had in my mind that we were going into this conversation tonight, and I mentioned it to him. He was talking about some of the trainings he does, and I'll talk to you later about that information. But as I was listening to this tonight and reflecting off that conversation yesterday, I'm thinking, well, as we're establishing this strong foundation in equity culture, it finds its way back to environmental justice. And that's the term that I haven't heard mentioned tonight, which is, you know, environment is what we do. And this is the connection back to environmental justice. It's extraordinary.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Rick. Sam in the Foster City. Echo Rod's comment fully. Thank you, Donna, for your leadership and my colleagues for being on this committee. Thank you for the board for allowing us really to go through that journey and initiative. It wasn't easy. Thank you, staff, Shauna, Kirsten, and Jan, and everybody who was involved. It really wasn't easy, and at many points we were challenging ourselves and going back and forth. But thanks to your direction as board members, by really allowing us and being with us throughout the journey to do the maximum, because we had the option of doing the minimum, like my colleague said, and just have a diversity, equity, and inclusion and ethics policy to meet the bare minimum of this law and with the requirements. But all of you decided no, and we decided with you that no, this is not what we want. It's not a check the box. It's really something, being a living document, something that will continue to grow and make a difference, and something that we are all proud of. So I personally, it was a learning experience for me. I gained a lot of knowledge. So I want to thank you for giving me that opportunity. And Donna, again, thank you for the leadership.
Yeah, I have a question about the DEAI Council. So have we formed that yet, or who do we think, when do we think we're gonna form that, and what will that council's charge?
Sure. That is an internal staff council. As of implementation, it has been formed. An early version was actually formed last fall. And then we expanded it recently to include representatives from all of the departments, just about all of the departments. And so that group of staff is meeting twice a month now, and diving in on helping all the departments implement these actions.
And then finally, I'm trying to understand how the annual evaluation is the annual review, let's say, is going to work. are we gonna go through the work plan? I mean, how will you be presenting that to the board? Because I assume that will be a board presentation also.
Yes. To be determined and happy to take your ideas for that.
I am gonna suggest that it may make sense to have, and I don't know how we do this, but perhaps an outside set of eyes work either with the diversity council or work, you know, in reviewing how we've done. In meetings, both, I don't know, consultant, I don't know if we able to find someone, but I think that might be helpful. I mean, I don't think these are gonna be easy things to reach, right, and to attain, I should say, so, yeah, that's just a question, I haven't figured out, like, who it could be, but I don't like.
Maybe GCAP could continue along, possibly. DEAI consultant, or possibly these games are big, yeah. Sorry, Donna Wilson, really, sorry. The other possibility on that, 'cause I think it's a really good point, Carlos, a really good idea, would be maybe to go back to the 3 vendors that we all interviewed at the beginning and possibly re-interview a couple others and maybe find someone who would be interested in helping with the monitoring on an ongoing basis. So there's a few options. We could have one more meeting if you guys want. Figure that out.
And I do wanna, you know, what my male colleagues have said, that really it has been women who have held up this work. And, I mean, you guys have all been, I think stellar in keeping it moving forward. I've kind of been on this train, but I think you all have really done stellar work, and, you know, Shayna, particularly, you just running with this and trying to get this done, and now we're losing you to the power side. So thank you.
Other comments? Yes, Colleen.
Colleen Mackin. I think the internal reporting annually is equally as important as the external. And by that, I mean, maybe it would be beneficial to have a little debriefing from contractors that we contract with to see how difficult or easy it was to comply with what our ask is, because I think that feedback will tell us a lot.
Like, sorry, just a clarifying question, is that regard to like the supplier diversity?
Yes.
Okay, that's point taken, and I think that's something that we want to know as well, like,
Right.
the gap in our program, so.
We don't want to say, oh, we're doing everything right, and we think we're putting out what we want to see with people we do business with. We
Yeah.
wanted to know and understand their difficulties as well, and how we can maybe collaborate to make that better.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Thank you, everyone. These were very good comments and good questions. This is a big deal for us as an organization. Can I get a motion to approve as requested?
Public comment, please.
Oh, public comment, yeah, thank you. Sorry, we should take public comment on this. Is there any public comment? I don't see any public comment in the room, and do you see any online? No, okay. I could have skipped that.
The attorney. Great, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the municipal clean energy diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion action.
And I can second.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Carlos. We can do a roll.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palazzo, Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos,
Yes.
Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae.
Aye.
Pacific Where am I? Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, Woodside.
Yes.
Thank you so much. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And the next item on the agenda is item 7, which is a review of the fiscal year 2023-24 budget.
Great. Andy Stern, interim chief financial officer. If my video or my internet or sound is unstable, I'll cut my video since I'm remote at the moment. I apologize for that. Next slide, please. We are going through, as required by law, to approve a budget before the end of June. On May 16th, we reviewed an initial draft that you'll see this evening with the Audit and Finance Committee. And we're doing that again tonight with all of you in hopes of expecting any input or changes you would like to see. On June 12th, we will review a revised draft budget with the Audit and Finance Committee that will reflect any changes or updates or comments that come out of this meeting, and an update for 1 more month of actuals to inform our year-end forecasts better. And then the same day, we'll review the same draft with the Executive Committee, and any changes or additions that come out of that, we'll review and seek your approval from this board on June 22nd. Next slide, please. So the key assumptions of this budget are that, and as you know, our PCE rates are based on PG&E's generation rates. There is a slight decline in rates projected for PG&E over the next 4 years. January 1, 2024 specifically is a slight increase of 1%. The reason that's important is because our fiscal year starting on July 1 crosses over half of the year of that January 1, 2024 increase. The PCIA rates, which are have been very volatile over the last few years and have driven largely the increase and decrease in rates we've had. It's a continuing decrease in rates as of January 1, 2024. We have assumed, based upon projections, that they actually may be negative, but for our purposes, for the purpose of the budget, we have assumed that they'll drop to 0 from an already low rate that we're experiencing today, both in San Mateo and Los Banos. And after 2024, we're assuming pretty significant increases for the next 4 years, near to rates of 2022, but still not approaching the rates of 2021. This forecast doesn't impact these changes don't impact the budget you're approving. However, they will impact the 5-year outlook that we'll show a little bit later. And all of our forecasts are based upon the Cal CCA group of CCA network has a robust forecasting arm, which we have adopted their forecasts. The net of those two rates of PG&E generation rates and PCIA rates results in the customer rates that we charge to PCE, and therefore, and they will be consequently relatively flat for the next 3 years, and then lower in 27 and 28, but still well above the very low year of 2021. The next three slides are kind of walk through a little bit of that, so I'll skim over them, but feel free to stop me anytime. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one more slide of assumptions. Sorry, go back. Back, there you go. One more slide of key assumptions. The cost of energy is budgeted at $311 million for the next coming year, an increase of $39 million, which is 14% over the forecast for this fiscal year, which ends in June. Resource adequacy cost projection accounts for nearly $31 million of that increase, so a large portion of the increase. Overall, the budget includes 2 conservatism contingencies built in. We have an energy cost volatility, we're calling of $15 million a year. As I'm sure you're aware, energy costs have been quite volatile for the last 6 to 9 months. And although they've stabilized significantly in the last few months, the summer and the kinds of climate change we've seen and the volatility in the energy markets, we built in a $15 million a year contingency. And secondly, I'm sure most of you know, we have a target of achieving 100% renewable and with 99% time coincidence renewability by 2027. The cost of doing that is very high and requires a series of 13 or 15 projects and contracts to be signed in the next few years. We've built in the cost. If we didn't achieve those contracts, the cost would be about $120 million higher if we don't achieve them. So we've built in a $56 million contingency over the next 5 years, just a small amount for this coming budget year, which is $770,000. But signing 15 new contracts on the timeline that we have is a huge task, and just to account for the possibility that some won't get signed or that others are delayed and end up getting signed would result in additional REC and RA costs and more market volatility exposure. So we built in some long-term contingency to reflect that. And the total cost is, even without those contingencies for the coming year, is still 9% higher than the FY23 forecast. So energy costs, while continue to be volatile, we're still predicting that they will be higher in total. Any questions before I move on? Okay, next slide. This is a complicated, but I'll try to make it simple. You don't have to look at the whole thing, but the top section is an example residential rate, which is the E1 rate, and the bottom section is an example business rate that we've built in. We actually do our budgeting with 70-something rates, but this is just an example, just to show you what's happening in most of the rates. So the top section for San Mateo County, 2023 actuals is 15.6 cents, which represented a 3% increase. And then if you look across the right from there, we're assuming that they're up about 1% next year and up 2% the following year, and then down 1%, and then down 9% and down 6%. Again, these are based on CalCCA's prediction, but they end up in 2028 at 13.5 cents, which is somewhat about 10% below where we are today. Same thing is true for the business rates. Next slide, please. PCIA, the 2023 column is about 3, same structure, by the way. 2023 column is about 3 over. So we had an 83% decrease in the PCIA, which has contributed to some very substantial gains and net profits in the operation. And then 2024 forecast, we're assuming 0, as I mentioned, and then starts to increase fairly substantially in percentage-wise in the coming 3 years after that. However, at 2.3 cents in 2028, that's still well below the rate that it was just a couple of years ago. The more important is how that translates into PCE's rates, which is the next slide. Again, the same structure, although slightly different rates because of slightly different PCIAs. But if you look at the third column, San Mateo County residential, 14.388 cents, slightly higher next year, and then slightly down in the coming 4 years. So an expectation of lower revenues in the 2028 timeframe, reaching 10.4 cents, which is still above what it was 2 years ago, but is below what it is this year and next. any questions on those detailed and very complicated slides? And I commend you if you actually have questions about what you've seen.
Yeah, there was a question from Adam.
Thank you, through the chair. This is Alan Lorraine from San Mateo. I'm just gonna throw out a question about BCIA because I'm just a little surprised to see the fluctuations and particularly the increases in BCIA, because I thought the general idea was we're paying PG&E for having taken people out of their system, and we're paying this because they had long-term contracts related to those customers, and so we're supposed to be making them whole on that. But at some point, would we not be free of that obligation, or is it because we're bringing new people on, or just maybe elaborate?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, and then Jan and or Jeremy can jump in if I don't cover it all. First of all, I'm not sure there's a real expectation of when the PCIA will go away completely. It's probably another 10 or 15 or 20 years before it goes away completely. Although these are forecasts for what is going to happen in 5 years, I'd be hard pressed to tell you that anyone really knows what's going to happen. But the rationale for why the PCIA was probably expected to go up is because energy prices that have been fairly high and have remained fairly high, although they've stabilized. The expectation is that energy prices will go down in the coming 2 to 3 to 4 years. And the PCIA is largely based on the difference, but it is largely based on market rates of energy and the difference between what PG&E has contracted for energy and what they can resell that energy for at market prices. So if they can sell it for very high prices, which they are doing right now, the PCIA is very low. And if they sell it for prices which are lower than they are now and or lower than what they contracted, then they pass that cost along to customers that were customers of theirs when they signed the contracts.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily add too much more to that. The expectation as to when the PCIA will go away, not for a long time. So 2035, 2040, I think, because there are some long-term contracts that utilities continue, that they sign, 25, 30-year contracts that they sign. So we have to wait for those to expire.
I'd add to that the one thing, the only constant that we've seen in the last 5 years is that our projections are terrible. They have driven us crazy because of the way the fluctuations have occurred. We haven't predicted exactly where they would be and when they would be there. But that's not to say we shouldn't try. We should, and we do. And Andy's worked very hard at that, but and Andy completely educated us when these rates went totally into lunacy 2 years ago, that the projections just are very, very difficult.
I wouldn't say the projections are terrible. The day that the projections are done, they are as good as they can be. There are a lot of outside forces that we don't have any control of that make things change. You know that for anything in life, right? You think something's gonna happen and it ends up.
Carlos, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so Andy, actually, it's Carlos Romero. So Andy actually probably know the answer to this, but let's see, this is slide 39, where you have the overall budget includes two these conservatism contingencies. One is the energy volatility, so it's $15 million. So that is factored into this total cost of 9% higher for 2023, and as well as the $770,000 for fiscal year 2024 for the time coincidence piece. Those two numbers.
That's not quite right. Sorry to interrupt. The the budget, and we haven't gotten to that slide yet. We focused only on the revenue parts, the detailed revenue parts, but the budget for cost of energy is budgeted at 311 million, which represents a 14% increase over the FY23 forecast. And the bottom bullet is that with that, and that 39 million includes some contingencies, $15 million plus 770,000. So basically $16 million of contingency. Without that contingency, the forecast would still be 9% higher.
Okay, thanks. That's a helpful clarification.
Donna and then Jeff.
Donna Colson, City of Burlingame. This is one of the main reasons when you look at our budget and the carryover from year to year, we had a target of 180 days of cash on hand. Part of that has been to absorb some of the volatility, unexpected volatility that we have seen. The CCAs that have not survived or gone out of business have been ones that started when things were inverted and couldn't get their cash systems put together and kind of laid out firmly and couldn't financially make it. So we got very fortunate, started a good time with really conservative financial policy. And that's one of the reasons we do have so much cash on hand. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that later, but for now.
Any other questions? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to just make one comment on the other conservatism contingency of the 56 million over five years. So as you may recall in previous presentations that we've given you about the 24/7 goal and contracting for renewables, that in the long run, that actually is less expensive than being subject to the volatility of natural gas prices and fossil fuels. Because once you contract for renewables, that's the price. You don't have any fuel volatility in that. We'll come back to you next month probably to get into more details about how we're moving that time coincidence goal to 2027, just because of the difficulty of getting contracts done in order to make it by 2025. But I just wanted to say that part of that extra money is if we aren't able to make it by 2027, it's actually more expensive for us to have to purchase renewable energy credits and other things like that, rather than having those locked in prices for contracts. So that's kind of the contingency if we aren't able to get there in time. I just wanted to clarify that it's not more expensive. It's the same cost as if we were to continue our current approach, and that there is actually less risk as we've shown you in the past.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Yep. Any other questions? Okay, let's go, Brianna, a few slides forward.
There's a question from Paul in Los Banos. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. I had a question just about the 2023 rollover. What was the surplus from 2023 rolling over? And I know that.
I'll show you that in a second.
Okay, gotcha.
I'll get there in a second. So cost of energy assumptions, in addition to what I already talked about of the volatility, is 100% renewable power by the end of calendar year 2025. We've assumed that that by 2027, calendar year 2027, that will be 100% renewable and 99% time coincidence. We've used forward price curves, which are market price predictions from a outside third-party provider based on March 22nd pricing. That gives us pricing by every node that where we have power generated or a PPA or a hedge contract. We've assumed that we will purchase all RA in compliance at the then current market prices. That's also another one of many assumptions in the budget that are really hard to do and very volatile. And we've assumed that we continue to have EV adoption rates fairly significant, and it adds about 50 to 100 gigawatt hours per year, which is roughly 1 to 3% of our load. And the sum of all those yields the load assumptions at the bottom, which won't make a whole lot of sense to anyone from a number standpoint. However, from a 3.7 million megawatt, 3.7 billion megawatt hours per year. Is that right? 3.7 billion? No, 3.7 billion. 3.7 billion megawatt hours per year. And growing a little bit each year through 2028, which is the forecast period. Next slide. Staffing assumptions, there are currently 38 positions, and the FY24 budget assumes adding about 8 or 9 more listed here. I know they haven't all come up in Jan's CEO report yet, but these are budgeted into our system, into our budget planning. Next slide, please. And two other significant budgeting assumptions, we've assumed solar and storage on public buildings. We've assumed they will be based on capital outlays of 7.4 million in this current fiscal year and 43 million in the following. We've assumed that 30 to 35% of it will be recovered through the regulations that haven't yet been tested, but we've assumed, based upon all the input we've gotten, that we can recover investment from an investment tax credit standpoint, 30 to 35% of that capital outlay 2 years after the capital outlay. And we've assumed that the repayment for those solar and storage on the public buildings will be paid back via electricity usage over a 20-year period. Next slide, please. Here's the answer, or hopefully an answer to the question that was just raised. This is the first 3 columns is the current fiscal year. So that's and this is just a summary level is the current year's budget, the current end of year forecast, and then the variance. The budget for revenues was nearly 368 million. Our current forecast is 431 million, so $63 million above. Going down to the net change in net position, we assumed that we would have $73 million of positive change in net position. We currently forecast 140 million. This is based on March financial data. And the net position at the end of the period, we projected to be budgeted to be 248 million, and we project to be 307 or almost $308 million. In the column on the far right with the red arrow is our proposed draft budget, which has operating revenues of $475 million, has a change in net position of $125 million. And the unrestricted days cash on hand would grow from an end of year forecast of 304 to 397. This is in the initial draft budget. There will be some minor changes as we've refined some things in the next time, and will reflect also an extra month of actuals, as well as any additions or direction we get out of this meeting. I'll pause for a second. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide.
Hey, Andy, I've got a question on that.
Sure.
So I guess I heard someone mention previously that the cash on hand policy is 180 days. What's the thinking with increasing the cash on hand with this budget?
Yeah, so why don't we hold, I appreciate the question. Why don't we hold that a little bit? We have at least one slide where we'll tee up some of that, and I have some comments we can make about that, if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
Okay, next slide, please.
Wait, can I just ask you a quick question about RA, which seems that that's going to be maybe one of the big unknowns, given the PCA has been tamed for a year or so. So the assumptions are that we're buying RA market prices, right? And we're getting those market prices from whoever we go to say, where do we think the market is? And that is just a projection, and that could be grossly off, correct?
Correct.
Hope it won't be too grossly off. You can't imagine our impacts going higher than they already are, but who knows? Yeah, I mean, they could, yeah, they've gone way up.
Yeah.
They're very high. They're very high right now. It's hard to imagine them going higher, but it's also, it would have been hard to imagine that they'd be this high a year ago.
Yeah, well, remember how we freaked out on that PCIA 4 years ago, 3 years ago? Okay, thanks.
True. Go ahead, Andy.
We think we've factored in enough volatility and contingency, but we built in some contingency of energy forecast for this year, budgeted last year, and we built in contingency last year. So, and a really significant chunk of that's a $264 million budget versus $269 million forecast. A really significant part of that $5 million happened in a 10-day period in September, last September over Labor Day, when the heat wave was very extended. Next slide, please. These are the same numbers and but just expanded operating expenses in more detail, just if you're interested in more detail, and I'll pause for a second, but fundamentally, this is the same thing. We're changing that position, shows a budget of 125 million next year, and unrestricted days cash on hand projected to be 397 days ending. Next slide, please. This is a look, 5-year look, initial 5-year look at what we believe will happen based upon all the projections we've made and forward price curves and long-term contingencies and forecast for PCIA and PG&E rates. The change in that position of $125 million under that column with the red line or red arrow, sorry. And then substantially less in the following years, but still positive. And the circle at the bottom shows unrestricted cash on hand going from 397, dropping to 367 in 2025. And that's largely related to the significant solar and storage investment capital outlay we expect to make, but then growing to probably not going to be quite 500, but definitely over 490 when at the next meeting, but around 500 days cash on hand. And I haven't forgotten your question, Michael, but let me postpone that for just at least one more slide. Next slide, please. And this is the same, a lot of detail that's really hard to read, but will be posted. But it's just the same numbers that were on the prior one, but not in less summary form. Just expanded operating expenses. Next slide, please. So this is somewhat related to your question, Micah, is what do we do with all this extra money? And I'll let Jan talk about what we're doing and what the next steps are.
So we had a discussion about this at the Audit and Finance Committee, and we discussed this further internally and with some board members. So what we recommend is that the executive committee form a subcommittee to determine an overall policy on how to use the excess funds. So we believe there's going to be excess funds. We know that the forecast is going to change. Who knows if what we're projecting is actually going to be the reality. But we feel that it's really a policy for the organization on, considering what our mission is and other objectives that we might have, that the executive committee should determine what should that policy be. And then we as staff would develop possible options and recommendations on the use of funds and also ask you all to submit your ideas to staff. You need to submit them to us rather than to the subcommittee so we don't have Brown Act issues. And we'll analyze the different options on what could be done with the excess funds. And then we would meet with the executive committee subcommittee to evaluate those options, go over what our analysis is on what the impact would be of the different options, and then have the executive committee subcommittee provide a recommendation to the executive committee. And the thought would be that that would happen in the next 90 to 120 days. And then if the timing works out, then the executive committee could present those recommendations to the full board, possibly at the board retreat that we have in September, which is 4 months away. So that's our recommendation. Rather than coming up with anything specific at this time, we feel that it's really a policy decision for the board, and the executive committee is the designated committee to think about what the policy direction would be, and to come to you as the board on what their recommendation might be.
And Jan, if you don't mind, I wouldn't be doing my job as even without the word interim chief financial officer to be without at least weighing in a little bit. Energy prices are highly volatile. We've seen that in the past. PCIA is not only hard to predict, but has been extremely hard to predict, and has surprised us on the upside and the downside very, very dramatically. The long-term projections are based on continuing rate setting as in the format that we've been doing, which is using PG&E's generation rates and expected PCIA, which are probably very highly suspect 5 years out, 3 to 5 years out, but we're using them anyway. And at the same time, we have an ongoing effort, internal effort to look at potentially revising our rate setting methodology to a cost of service one, which would divorce our rates from PG&E's rates and allow and force them to be tied to what actually costs are versus what PG&E's are potential PG&E's rates, which are tied to their costs, but don't necessarily match our costs and don't necessarily match how we work. So the ability 180 days is our company policy. In my mind, it's lower than is probably recommended, but it's certainly good. It's a good policy. It's where a number of CCAs would hope to be, but it's what not nearly the level that other very highly high quality CCAs would be at. But 500 days is probably well above what would be necessary to even maintain that same level of financial comfort. So.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, let me see if there's any questions about any of this from members of the board.
Thanks, sorry, Don Colson, Burlingame. So if we move to a cost of service model, would that just by definition reduce the overages that we tend to be having in this model?
Say that again.
If we move to a cost of service model, so right now the reason we get overages is because we set our pricing at 5% below PG&E, and whatever the price comes in, there's volatility, and that's how it goes. If we move to a cost of service, we're gonna tie it into what we're paying. By definition, wouldn't that potentially narrow the amount of excess revenue we would be?
Okay, so
Well,
questions.
By definition, if we could accurately predict in advance where costs would be and accurately predict load, then you're right. In theory, it would narrow it. PG&E or the electricity companies, the independent, the IOUs, set their rates basically based on a cost of service model, and then a CPUC defined margin that they're allowed to charge. And yet they're constantly missing the mark in large amounts because nobody can really predict what's going to happen with energy markets. Nobody's going to predict when and if a country invades another country, and prices go. And so theoretically, yes, but that also subjects us to potentially more changing rates more often to accommodate changes in the economy or the world economy or market conditions or whatever.
And I would just add, it's up to us to decide what that margin would be. So whatever you want. We would look to the board for that too.
Well, you could also do things where you could reward people for saving money during our peak times, and you could actually smooth out your volatility. So it could become a strategic thing and a direct, sort of a conservation tool along with, you could do all kinds of things with it. Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Yes. I'm thinking out loud a little bit here, Andy, and anyone else. Thinking about your conservatism contingencies, there is, and I think should be, a negative correlation between resource adequacy pricing and PCIA, because resource adequacy the spike tends to reflect a constraint in capacity, which also has resulted in higher overall energy prices, which results in overall lower PCIA. So I'm trying to think of if resource adequacy prices continue to spike, that actually probably means PCIA will go down. And I'm trying to decide if that would be a net positive or negative for us.
Yeah, I'll give you some input, but I also start with the fact that you could be right. One of the contributors, there's many contributors to why resource adequacy prices go up and down, but one of those contributors is there's a lot more CCAs and chasing the same resources, all trying to be compliant. And when you have many buyers of very limited resources, the price tends to go up. The law of supply and demand. The CCAs are only getting bigger and more prevalent. And so that could be a counterweight to your prediction, but I can't, there's nobody, and certainly not me, that would say your theory doesn't make sense. It certainly makes sense, but I wouldn't tell you that I would count on it.
Paul, did you have a question?
Not a question. I'm going to open up for comment.
Okay. Are there any other questions? And then if not, we'll take public comment. Okay, we'll take any public comment that anyone has. I don't see any public comment in the room. I don't see any public comment on others. Okay, go ahead. We have one public comment online.
Micah, go ahead.
Thanks. Nellie told me I spoke out of line during the question, so I just wanted to say thanks to Andy for answering the question. I guess just as a follow-up, I think one thing that would be nice to see as a resident would to see a band in terms of the range of cash on hand days that you set, because I think ultimately that money's coming from customers. So over collection or having more cash on hand than you need is ultimately coming from the customers paying the bills. So just a recommendation.
Thank you. I don't see any other public comment, so I'll close public comment and take comments from members of the board. And I'll just introduce it by saying we've spoken a little bit about how the projections are highly volatile and energy prices in general have been highly volatile. mean, obviously, the numbers we're seeing in this budget are really big numbers. We have never seen numbers like this before, at least not in the positive. 2 years ago, we were totally shocked by the level of the loss that we were projecting, and in fact, the loss that we ended up incurring in that year. Not at this magnitude, but a huge shift from what we had projected. So I just think that we should weigh that, and I personally, I do think that the staff recommendation on needing a mechanism to address the policy issue here. We're not a bank. We have no intention of growing our cash without control. That's not what we're about. The only reason this is happening is because these markets are so volatile. We happen to establish ourselves at the right time with very conservative policies. So we are extremely economically healthy to our benefit, and well, let's make sure it's to the benefit of our customers. Paul, please.
Yes, thank you. And I know I'm probably like the new guy here, so bear with me if there's a lot I need to catch up on. But I just quickly want to kind of paint the picture for, and I know I'm in a whole other jurisdiction, but paint the picture for you guys of Los Banos. So our median household income here is $69,000 a year. Every jurisdiction that's in on this meeting doubles my median household income. In fact, one of your jurisdictions is 7.5 times more than what I have in my jurisdiction. So my constituents, again, whole different realm that we're facing here in Los Banos. I'm really pleased that we talked about the DEAI and you know, the things like that and the equity and inclusion. But I'm going to bring them up. You know, your two goals were maximize your efforts to eliminate disparities, and another goal was to define energy equity. So we're talking about a $66 million surplus one year, $125 million surplus another year. And my constituents have, again, either 7.5 times less or half less the median income than the other jurisdictions. And so that's kind of like a big red flag to me. You know, the other thing is, you know, Los Banos, we're 75% Hispanic or Black community. So we are the definition of an underserved community over here. And so I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration when creating these budgets, that we're not all on a level playing field. And then the second thing, again, is just my question about the budget that's created versus the policy that's in place about cash on hand. I think it's a kind of a little dangerous curve there to start creating a budget that actually goes against the policy that you already have. I think the policy should be changed first if that's the, you know, the goal of the JPA. So, but that's just my 2 cents.
Can I respond to the policy issue?
Sure.
The policy is that the board set is a minimum days cash on hand. And the intention of the policy is that if days cash on hand got below 180, that there would have to be some kind of change, either increased rates or cuts in programs or other expenses. The policy doesn't address what the maximum is that we would have to hold. That is a board policy decision, and your comments about disparity and demographics and income levels, those were discussed at the Audit and Finance Committee, and the Audit and Finance Committee recommended this excess funds approach to allowing setting up a subcommittee for the board to have a discussion about all the various options. And what you've proposed, I'm sure, and suggested is one of the many options that the board could and should consider.
No, and thank you for clarifying the policy thing, because I didn't know if it was just 180 days straight or if there was a maximum or minimum. I think, you know, again, my concern for my constituents is they don't need to have money taken out of their wallet in the first place, right? And put into a giant savings account and then hopefully given back later on. So I think that's just kind of the point I want to make.
That's it.
Thank you. Betsy Nash, Menlo Park, and I would very strongly concur with what Paul said about Los Gatos. I think that's probably more true for your population, but I think all of our customers, all of our residents would appreciate that. Having said that, I had some communications with Jan and staff before, and it's about possible uses or needs within Menlo Park, given we are trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. And some requests that we have. I'm wondering whether it's even worth bringing that forward, or whether at this point, given the idea of a policy on excess funds, we should I even move forward with my request, or not?
I would suggest you go ahead and do that.
Okay.
We didn't feel that we as staff could set that direction, so I just lay it out there and see what the response is.
Okay, well, just in a nutshell, I'll make it brief, happy to go into it in more depth, but essentially, we are, as everyone is going through our budget right now, we've tried to have some very strong climate goals. And as part of the climate goals, we have been spending a lot of money on our electrification and on everything we need to do to meet the goals. One of the pieces that is not coming together as quickly right now is that our EV charging infrastructure, and particularly for the emergency vehicles. And so I am asking for $300,000, $500,000 for Menlo Park to support two fast EV chargers for our emergency vehicles. We have been piloting EV police cars, and we are getting more of them for, and we're planning to get more of them, but we do have insufficient EV charging to support all of our EV fleet. And so, well, we have basically, I'm looking to see whether there's any interest, any ability with my fellow board members to support our EV infrastructure in the tune of $300,000 to $500,000.
Other comments from members of the board? Donna?
So, thank you, Becky. That's really interesting that, because I think we're all trying to electrify our fleets, right? So to me, this all falls under policy work and allocation work. And so my suggestion would be that it's a broader topic of partially using some of these reserves for a pool similar to what we did on the electrification standards for the municipal buildings. And we set up a, knowing this is now a need, EV infrastructure, and it's like a program, and we set it up, we allocate money to it, and then that's how I would funnel it, as opposed to a one-off approval for an individual city. I think if we open that floodgate, it just is not, that kind of goes against the fairness kind of conversation. So, yeah, I mean, it might be that this is a really good use, and you guys are gonna prototype it, you're gonna help all the rest of us lay out the program. And that might be a really good use of money, but I just don't feel tonight, like I personally can commit to it, not that I'm not interested in it, just because of the policy and the process of how we need to consider it. So if you could hold on, while we work on this work and submit it as an idea, I think that would be the appropriate way to handle a request like that. Thank you.
Well, we also have an EV charging. I'm sorry, Jeff. We also have an EV charging infrastructure program ongoing, and so I'd love to see how it fits into that.
No, actually, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Yes, we actually are in the program with the PCE infrastructure, and that is covering 6 to 10% of our costs. And because we're talking about lighter duty vehicles, apparently they're not covered by the PGE program, which has a stacking program with the PGE. So this is a separate need. And one of our concerns is we're going into budgets, and we've got quite a few different pieces in play. So we've got our budget is tighter than anticipated, and I'm surprised. And so the request was, knowing that there was a surplus here, knowing that right now, as well, basically with the type with the Ninth Circuit decision where we don't know what's going on with the REACH codes, basically whatever we can do to promote voluntary programs, to promote the demonstration that these concepts work is the idea. And
So, one way that maybe this could be approached is, we could set up, like just one program that we could add into the mix to consider along with all the staff stuff. Would be something like a revolving loan program that we could make loans to cities at a low interest rate. To say, for example, put this infrastructure in place, knowing that you would then have 5 years to pay it back, so you wouldn't have to hit it all in one budget. So like just present it and then we can think about it and figure out ways that maybe, you know, this could actually be feasible and work. And available, you know, holistically. And it's not a sort of, it would just have like a perfect idea. So maybe there's something like that where we can help you up front funding and then the city pays us back slowly. Those are all really interesting ideas behind you.
I just want to add that some of this is being contemplated right now under the local government electrification program. It is not totally defined as yet, so fortunately it may not respond tonight, but it is, just so you know, these same ideas that you're discussing are under development here with our team.
thank you, and we were actually really, Menlo Park was very excited to, I guess, our sustainability manager presented along with Brisbane's sustainability manager about our purchase pool, where we currently have gas infrastructure and we're either gonna have to replace that or we're hoping to go to electric heat pumps. And so we were very excited about that program and whatever we can do to push that forward. Thank you.
So, myself and Rod, I think that this is a policy issue. This is a lot of cash. And we need to figure out what the right mechanism is to deal with this cash, not as in any kind of one-off. And I'm not suggesting that or that you're pushing that. I'm not suggesting that, but I think anything's on the table. I think that we should share our ideas with each other about what we think are the most important uses for this cash. And I think that could be a loan program to our municipalities. It could be specific uses of the funds to achieve the goals that we've targeted. I just came from the Cal CCA conference when we had the highest discount rate for any CCA in California. We don't have that anymore, and we're not gonna have it. The Pioneers got a discount rate of between 15% and 20%. We're not gonna come close to that. But the other CCAs have changed their discount rates because everybody's seeing the same cash that we're seeing. This is, we're not isolated. This is happening in California because of the PCIA and because of electricity rates and the IOUs. And in general, the projections are just, when I said they're terrible, I didn't mean to say that they're. Look at them, fast comes to pass. It's very, very, not just to accurately predict what's gonna happen. I do think that personally that our mission is not just to provide clean energy, it's to provide energy at a low cost. And we've done that from the beginning. We've been 5% below PG&E. I'm proud of that. And I'm interested in increasing that so that all the customers can feel that. I mean, what Paul said about Los Banos, they're gonna feel that, but there are other ways we can use this cash that can be particularly targeted at communities that really need it and for solutions that, you know, are part of what we identify as our key priorities. But I think we need to weigh all of those together in a policy assessment and come to a conclusion that's a policy decision. Right.
I'm on the same vein, as you, Rick, I was thinking maybe we can think about a framework of like an equity map. But like, every city has their own demands, their own context, specific issues when it comes to obtaining clean energy and specific needs. We talked about Los Baños, we have our needs in Daly City, being a huge, sleeping.
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, me too. Or something that can just show what specific communities in.
I agree with you and what's a lot of what's being said. I'm wondering, for the excess fund recommended steps, just out of curiosity, staff recommends the executive subcommittee. Do you think if the board wants to go this way to form a subcommittee, does it have to be, does it have to be a subcommittee of the executive committee, or could it be other?
We can do anything we want, right? I mean, that's the recommendation of the staff. But
We're just suggesting it not be a quorum of any one committee,
Sure.
so that, yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we will make sure it's not a forum of any committee, so, because there'd be a brown act.
Of course, yeah. No, it just sounds like there's some.
The subcommittee full
Yeah, no,
quorum, with no quorum of any.
Right.
Of any of the other committees.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Okay, Anders.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think we need to look at this whole issue holistically. Obviously, this is a great problem for us to have. And I think Andy's point it's well taken, right? He's the CFO, right? I'm just gonna say that, as he said, some of the really successful CCA have obviously higher than 180 days cash on hand. So this is something we need to consider carefully as we think strategically how this organization needs to move forward. And then looking at some of the key strategic initiatives and what this organization is about and trying to achieve. As we look at these extra resources that we now have on hand and that we're projecting. Obviously, we need to first consider all the contingency that's required, right, Andy, as you pointed out, moments ago, how utility rates are extremely volatile, and this was not that long ago that we were surprisingly, in a deficit situation. So, so that's the risk adverse factor would first need to come into play. And as we discussed the EIA, obviously, socioeconomic will certainly need to be considered there. Not every jurisdiction is, have the same socioeconomic, and I understand that. So, and energy is something that everybody needs to use regarding your socioeconomic situation. So there need to be an equity lens through all of this. But we need to look at this holistically, and then prioritizing our goal from the highest priority to the next. And then fund it accordingly. And I think that's how we need to look at it. So between, resiliency, right, between encouraging our ratepayers to do battery, for example, and more on-site generation, for example. How can we use these excess to really achieve those really important goals that we set out to achieve at the beginning? I think we need to look back at those initiatives. And then start hammering out the list of programs and then prioritizing each one of those based on the expected extra resources we have. That's all I got. Thanks, Rick.
Jennifer.
Thank you. I wanted to resurface the possibility also of an ad hoc subcommittee. So I know we've been talking about a formal subcommittee, but an ad hoc subcommittee could meet as a derivative of the board for the specific purpose of determining what to do with these funds. I think that's also something that's been discussed by the Audit and Finance Committee.
I just wanted to add to this, I think it's probably on everyone's mind, but definitely climate action is very, very important, trying to reduce our carbon footprint, which is ultimately is affecting our most vulnerable communities first and most.
Comments? Okay, so the staff recommendation is to form an ad hoc subcommittee at the June 12th executive committee. That there are many people here who aren't on the executive committee. And if any of you would like to be on a subcommittee addressing this, you can let me know. You can say now, or you can send me an email and let me know. And I'll make sure that that comes before the executive committee. And I think the best solution would be to have a recommendation for how we address this, not the answer, from the executive committee, and to bring that back to all of you at the next board meeting, so that we can make a decision as a whole board about how we're going to address this, because this is a big issue for us. And you know, it like was said, this is a good problem to have, but we have to be very careful and thoughtful about how we manage it, because it can have a real impact. Yes.
So at the June 12th meeting or meeting or the June 22nd, you'll let us know the right person to send our ideas to?
Yes, or people. Well, I mean,
And not for, to be honest, you're not.
no, I understand. Right, because I really want this to be a dialogue issue for, because this is I mean, we've had a lot of issues come before us as PCE. I think we've handled them in general very well. This year's a huge transition year, right? We have a CEO change. This is a earth-breaking change for PCE. Jan's been here 7 years. This is a really big deal for us. And there's a lot, and we're a much more mature organization than we've been. So this is a good problem to have. And I think it's a time where we can really look at this issue, and we can, in connection with looking at what our strategic goals are and where to take those, we can make some big decisions. But I want it to be a dialogue amongst all of us. It's not just going to be a subcommittee issue. So your question is a very good question, Leslie, because we have to make it available to everyone here to share their thoughts and ideas, not just in this public context, but also by submitting those ideas to the subcommittee. And I don't want to set it up where we're principally encouraging you all to submit your ideas to an ad hoc subcommittee. I really principally want those ideas to come out in this kind of a public forum, because I think this is the healthiest place for them to come out. And we're all on city councils or boards of supervisors. So it's our lives to be able to deal with these issues in public. And I think we can do that, and we can do that very effectively, and the public can watch this. And I think that will be very healthy for us and for them.
You do great.
Yes.
Marty Medina, San Bruno. Earlier, I thought I heard submitting it to staff to avoid the Brown Act violation. So this wouldn't be submitted the ad hoc committees, it would be to staff.
Probably true.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's probably right.
All right, thank you.
And also, like, we just, so when they to the CAP,
yeah, this is an important issue for the CAC. to consider, and given our history with the CAC, we know they will weigh in. Okay, so is that,
I want a clarification on exactly where we ended here. So we suggested a subcommittee, executive committee. I think what you're suggesting is that it be expanded beyond that to include other board members who are interested, and at the next executive committee, that the ad hoc subcommittee would be discussed and who was going to be on that. Is that the plan? I just trying to understand the timing.
actually, what I'm suggesting is not different from what staff's suggesting. I'm suggesting that the executive committee discuss it and decide what kind of an ad hoc committee to set up.
Okay.
And I've asked if there's individuals on the board who aren't on the executive committee that would like to serve on an ad hoc committee to let me know. There may not be. It may be that it's all executive committee, so we'll find out.
Okay.
But I think if I'm getting the consensus, the direction is to refer to the executive committee to talk about it on the 12th and to bring back a recommendation to the board at the June meeting.
And this will be to set policy, it's not for individual projects.
Correct. This is to set policy. Okay, so we are moving on. The next item on the agenda is approval of the new PCE rates to be effective as of July 1st.
Justin will be making, so this is where we're at. Anyway, I think you know the schedule. We'll have to know. Okay. Justin, thank you.
Are you for the next item?
Maybe we should introduce that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, good evening. My name is Justin Fine, for those of you who haven't met, I'm the Strategic Accounts Manager here at Clean Energy. I'm filling in tonight wearing a different hat for Leslie Brown, our account services, who could not be here tonight. So I am going to deviate a little bit from the conversation we just had from the macro level, talking very micro about a single rate change we are proposing tonight. On Monday, May 22nd, PG&E published advice letter 6946E updating its electric rate and tariffs effective June 1st. These updates include 4 revenue requirement changes impacting distribution rates, resulting in a net decrease to the system average rate of about ½ cent or a 2% decrease. It's worth noting that this is a change for the executive committee who heard from Leslie Brown a few weeks ago when we were expecting a increase in distribution costs of about 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour. You know, as we've discussed tonight, and what we know from experience is that it's hard to understand exactly how PG&E rates are going to change, even a couple weeks before until we have a final advice letter. But generally, good news: T&D prices are going a little bit down for our customers. Just to be clear, these distribution rates have no impact on generation rates and therefore no impact on the energy generation rates. So the other rate change, and the rate change I'm here to talk about tonight, included in this update is a structural rate change to the ETOUC residential rate. We'll get a little bit more into the detail on the next slide, but this rate change increases the differential between peak and off-peak rates for both the distribution and generation. The rate change is intended to be revenue neutral across PG&E's customer base, and it's the first of 3 steps towards increasing the differential as directed by the California Public Utilities Commission in the general rate case or GRC Phase 2 decision. Next slide, please. So before we kind of deep dive into the details, we all have a common understanding of the ETOUC rate. So the ETOUC rate is a time of use rate that charges higher rates during the peak period, which is 4 to 9 p.m. every day. So the difference between the higher peak rate and the lower off-peak rate is what we call the peak off-peak differential. And the greater the differential, the
greater incentive to use electricity outside of peak hours 4 to 9 p.m. So looking at that little graphic we have from our website, actually, a great example of, really the high price hours between 4 and 9 p.m., lower rate all other hours. We went through a big transition at PCE in 2021, transitioning customers from flat rate to this time of use rate. A lot of effort went into educating customers on it. So what's happening in this rate change is the differential, so that yellow bar, the taller bar, will go slightly up, and the green bar, which is the off-peak rates, all hours, will go slightly down. And today PCE serves approximately 164,000 ETOUC customers. Next slide, please. So when this transition happened from the tiered E1 rate to the time of use ETOUC rate, the TOUC rate was, the differential was intended to be gradual. And so it was intentionally introduced with mild peak to off-peak differentials. This June 1st rate change increases the differential between peak and off-peak rates by 1 cent per kilowatt hour. This is done by increasing the peak rate by 0.6 cents about, and decreasing the off-peak rate by about 0.3 cents per kilowatt hour. At a PG&E system level, this rate change remains revenue neutral because customers use more electricity during the off-peak hours than during the peak hours. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for our customers? Should the board adopt these updated rates, Peninsula Clean Energy customers would maintain that 5% savings compared to PG generation costs. Additionally, the average Peninsula Clean Energy customer will save about 31 cents. Sorry, the average ETOUC Peninsula Clean Energy customer will save on average 31 cents per month. I want to make a point here. So I also included the care customers are expected to save on average. The difference between the 31 cents and the 25 cents is that care customers have smaller bills, and therefore about the same proportion of savings from the change. And then, so this is a structural rate change. Customers who use more electricity during off-peak hours compared to the average customer are going to save more than the average customer, while customers who use more electricity during peak hours will save less than the average customer. I want to be clear, the 5% savings with this rate change remains the same for all customers, regardless of usage types. Next slide, please. And so with that, the recommendation tonight is to approve this resolution authorizing the implementation of new Peninsula Clean Energy rates to be effective July 1st, 2023, to maintain a 5% discount on generation charges as compared to PG generation charges. And I would take questions.
I don't see any questions. Yes. Thank you. Just through the chair, Maureen Semateo. Just to clarify, it sounds as though you're mentioning two parts to this recommendation. One is, it sounds to me, coming about in response to PG&E's rates. But the other part is an ongoing program that Peninsula Clean Energy had already begun, and to some extent, Zoom has already agreed to the gradual change in the TOUC rates. Is that right?
Not necessarily. So what I referred to earlier was a statewide transition that happened, I think, in about 2021. That transitioned the default rate across all IOUs and I think all PCAs elected to go with this rate change to make the default rate this ETOUC time of use rate. So that's why we have 165,000 customers, residential customers on this rate. So it's a rate schedule, a rate tariff that customers can be on. They can always choose to, move to the flat rate. They could choose, if they have an EV, to go to the EV rate. And this is a rate option that our customers have, and that they are defaulted to when they start service with PG&E and their local system. Tonight, we're talking about following PG&E's rate change as we usually do. Usually, we see the whole suite of PG&E rates changing, and we modify or update our rates to make sure we maintain that 5%. tonight we're just talking about the PTOEC rate and adopting new rates to make sure we maintain that 5% savings. That make sense? Answer your question?
Okay, any other question? Question, is there any public comment? Yeah, any public comment in the room? I don't see any public comment online. I'll close public comment. If anyone has a comment in the room, Carlos.
Yeah, and by the way, thanks to staff for sending the weekly, newsletter. In the last newsletter, I think, there was that Canary Media article about income-based electric bills and the state may be moving in that direction. I assume that's going to turn the world. So what are the chances of, that, because the state is discussing that, right?
Actively.
Yeah, right, actively. Right.
It's before the CPUC.
Yeah. I mean, the article was quite long, but good, yeah. So, I mean, it's our assumption that you may be moving into that version.
Okay, this isn't on the agenda, so I don't want to spend time on this, but there's a lot of issues around it. And there'll be a lot of information to come out. I was in a conference call today on that. And there's going to be assessment of the impacts on all kinds of customers based on geography, based on what their level of electricity purchases and where their income is, because this would be changing rates from based on usage to changing rates based on what your household income is. It's a radically different structure. So,
I mean, fair enough.
we'll deal with it, and it will be before us and the state for some time. It's just begun. Okay, I don't see any other comments on this. Can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the resolution authorizing the implementation of new financial attainment rates to be effective July 1, 2023, and to maintain a 5% discount on generation charges as compared to PG&E generation.
Thank you, Leslie. Second by Leslie. Can we do a roll call?
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont. Yes. Brisbane. Yes. Homa,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos,
No.
Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae,
Aye.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, Woodside.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is board member reports. Anyone have a report?
Hi.
Please, Eric.
I think I said this last time, but June 3rd is Pacifica's Pride Parade. Everyone is welcome, 11 o'clock, Palmetto. If you're free, please join us.
Any other reports? I don't see any other reports, so we are closing the public session and we're going into a closed session. Nelly, will Anders still be on the line?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Paul?
Yes.
Can we just take a 2-minute break?
Yeah, let's take a 2-minute break. Have to leave, so no problem. Take